This is Ian Anderson with Fly Masters of Indianapolis, and we're going to tie up the Anderson Hammerhead for you. The materials that I'm using for this fly, I start with a Mustad R74 number 4 hook. We are using an extra large bead chain eyes, 4 of them. We're also using lead-free, 0.035 lead, or lead-free. I'm using Spirit River's glow-in-the-dark Flashabou, a yellow and an orange. We're using some pumpkin and orange silly legs for legs in the back. We are going to be using some brown sparkle yarn. You can also use a brown chenille with this. And then lastly, we're using a crawdad orange Magnum zonker strip. Okay, we're going to tie up the Anderson Hammerhead here. We start out by attaching our thread right here behind the eye of the hook. This is where we are going to attach our dumbbell eyes. I'm going to tie in my 4 bead chain eyes right here behind the eye of the hook. I want to leave myself about a half an eye length right behind the eye of the hook here. Bring my thread on down the hook shank, and I'm going to attach some lead-free wire. I'm going to put in, this is a 0.035 lead-free. You can use lead wire too. I'm going to put in 10 wraps right in here. I'm going to cut those off. Smooth that out. You can put a little bit more if you want, just to give it a little bit more weight. Smooth those off a little bit right there. And then I'm going to shove all those lead wraps right up against those dumbbell eyes. Put just a little bit of a thread dam back here on the back end. It really is not necessarily to hold the thread, the lead wraps in place. It does that, but it also gives us a little bit of a transition here for the other materials on the fly. I bring my thread back down here to the end of the shank, and I'm going to tie in my tail material. I get my first bit of Flashabou here. This is a glow-in-the-dark Flashabou, and I'm going to wrap that up on the hook. I get my second stretch, some yellow. Set that on up there. Then I'm going to get my rubber legs. These are just silly legs, pumpkin and orange. Wrap these in. Put in a couple wraps forward, come back, fold all of that back like this. And then just wrap all that down real well. Bring my thread back up here forward to the lead wraps. I'm going to take, I've got some brown sparkle yarn I'm going to tie in right here. Wrap that on down to the back here. And I'll elaborate on this later, but this is more or less some filler material to cover up the hook shank, and wrap that all forward. You can use a chenille, you could use a dubbing if you want. It doesn't have to be the yarn.
Good morning.
Tie that off right here. And then we'll add in our zonker. Now we'll need to turn this over to start this, even though we'll end up turning it over when we finish it. What we're going to do is we're going to take our magnum cut of zonker here, and we're actually going to put it up on the hook shank, upside down. And we're going to basically set it up so that this whole skin patch right here covers up where our lead wraps are. And then I'm going to tie that in. And I'm going to put a whole bunch of thread wraps down on this to tie that in real good. This does a couple of things. Not only does it bind it in real nice for us, but it also gives me a nice kind of smooth platform for tying this in, wrapping it on. The nice thing is that by doing it this way, our zonker strip is far enough back that we can get basically just 2 wraps of the zonker strip overlapping a little bit, and it's enough to cover up here. So I take my zonker strip and it flips over here. I have to wet my fingers a little bit to keep the hair out of the way, and you'll notice that when I wrap over here, I'm actually overlapping the zonker just a little bit, and what that does is it helps to push the hair down. I bring this back over this way, and here on my second wrap, when I come down on this side, you'll notice that the zonker skin is right up against this eye right here, which is what we want. Because now when I turn the fly back over, what I'm going to do, again, you have to wet your fingers to get all this out of the way, I'm going to pull and split the hairs up a little bit right here. And ideally what I want is I want my skin to come right up a little bit behind that eye, and then you pull it forward between the 2 eyes right here, and that's where we tie that in. And this will help prevent us from getting basically an overly large head, because that skin on that magnum is pretty long. And then what I'm going to do when I cut this, I'm actually going to reach in with my scissors and cut at a little bit of an angle like this, and what that will do when I've cut through that is it gives me just a little triangular tag that will set right down in between those eyes. So now when I tie this down here, basically my thread will pull all that right down in between the eyes, and again I'm helping prevent from getting too much of a blob of skin and hair and everything all around those eyes. Go ahead and throw on some extra thread wraps. You don't have to be stingy with them on this fly. And this is going to ride hook point up, so this side here actually isn't that important that you get all that covered up with thread. Ultimately, you're just going to want to make certain that you get all of this kind of covered up in here.
The English ones, they only make a couple of them, and those are going to be all over.
So once we get all that covered up, you're going to bring your thread on up to the front here. Just basically kind of make that a little pointed nose just to taper that out, kind of finish the fly, give it a little bit more of a finished look. And do your whip finish. Cut your thread off. Go ahead and put some glue right through here. Make certain that that's all shored up nice. The last thing that we're going to do here is we're going to take our legs here and we're going to trim those up a little bit. I like to actually cut these so that they're a little bit varying in length, so my flashaboo and my legs and everything aren't all the same, but I'll cut them so that they're all basically about 1.5 times the length of the whole hook. And that's basically your finished fly. So there actually is a method to the madness here in this particular fly in the Anderson Hammerhead, and the thing is that when you're fishing for carp, especially up in the Great Lakes in the clear water, they can be rather spooky. You don't want to use a lot of flash material in your flies, so the tail piece right here is actually, this is a glow-in-the-dark Spirit River Flashaboo, and that's chosen because it doesn't have a lot of reflectivity and everything, but it emits its own color. The rubber legs are in there simply to give it a little bit of life. Rubber legs are always a real good choice. The 4 bead chain eyes are put up here simply to broaden out the head a little bit, but also it provides a little bit of rattle to it. And then the rabbit is put in simply because, and it's a zonker strip that's put in because it will pulsate as it is stripped and retrieved through the water. Now the other thing is this particular fly is fashioned on a long shank hook, and you'll notice that underneath here the yarn that I used right here, as I mentioned before, is kind of a filler. You can tie this on a shorter shank hook. You can actually eliminate all that, so if all you've got is a short shank hook, you don't even need this step. You can use other materials in here, dubbing as I mentioned, or chenille if you want, because mostly it gets covered up. But this fly also is designed as what I like to call a working fly, in that when you're on the water with it, if conditions dictate, you can adapt this fly. Sometimes the rubber legs and or the flashabou might be too much. If you're getting fish that are turning on it and they're not taking it, you can actually pull the rubber legs off and or just cut all of the flashabou off, so you've got no tail. If the bead chain eyes you think might be turning around and turning the fish off, you can actually clip those off on the outside. So the nice thing is if you got fish that are being a little bit more persnickety, you can turn around and adapt this fly right on the water.